Silver Doctors live on air. We're here at noon on the dot, according to my clock here. My name is Mike, the co-host of Silver Doctors Live on Air, and I have my co-host here, my other half, Mr. Paul Half Dollar, joining us as always. So, Paul, how you doing, my friend?
Doing good, Mike. How you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. There's a lot of things worthy of our attention as well as worthy of talking about. So we're going to touch on a little bit of everything, but yet before we get going back and forth, we'll give it a second for people to join us this afternoon for this live stream. And for those that are watching as of now, feel free in the chat. Let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to acknowledge your presence here as well as your geographical location. And if you have any questions or thoughts you want to share with us, feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll definitely acknowledge it as best we can. So we got Ryan O says hi. And so I'm not sure. Let me check and see how many people are tuning in thus far. Do you happen to see it, Paul? How many people are joining us thus far?
I see about 15, 16 tuning in right now.
All right, let's try to. Let me see. Let me try to clean some stuff up. Let's try to get. Let's go for a number. Let's go for about. Let me know when we get 20 or 30 or give or take in here. Then we'll try to get something going. Because I want to. One thing I've noticed is that me and you have a tendency of we just start rattling off, and we forget about the fact that people are watching us live.
Yeah. So sometimes I can get to rambling, so it's just.
Hey, can we all? Just because there's so much to talk about, man. It's like you can't get it done all in one segment, but yet we try. So, but it is what it is. So, but let's move right ahead. So, Paul, a couple things you want to talk about, a couple things I want to touch on. It says we got Terry Ryan from Colorado, we got Robert from Oregon. Welcome, everybody. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. And if you have any questions, feel free to let us know. We got Bella from Germany watching us. So we're going to definitely talk on Donald Trump's European visit. And I'm not sure what the entire tour is like or what countries he's going to cover. But, Paul, perhaps you might know yourself. But anyway, let's get started with today's topic. We're going to cover silver, gold, more importantly. But you want to touch on a particular subject matter and it has to do with what, Paul? Go ahead, lay it out for us.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, welcome, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I want to talk about, a lot of times people say that silver outperforms gold, right? Or people say that, when gold moves, well, silver moves faster, right? But what exactly does that mean, right? That's something that, sometimes it's something that we all have to learn, right? I had to learn this. You probably had to learn this. Everybody does, right? But I'd like to explain what it means because I think it's important because, gold's on the move right now, right? We were in the 1250s just a couple weeks ago, and now we're pushing through to 1350 right now, right? So silver is going to be on the move as well, right? So this, I think, is an important topic, and I just wanted to explain it. And it was actually the focus of my article this morning. Because gold is moving and silver is about to move, silver is really about to start moving, and I'm calling it like it's a turbocharger that's about to kick in, right? But here's how I would like to explain it. And I think about it this way, right? Gold is much more expensive, and it's a much larger market dollar percentage-wise, right? So even though there's less gold, right, that comes out of the ground than silver, it's a larger market in terms of the dollar value of all the gold that's traded. Silver, on the other hand, is a much smaller market. And silver is more accessible by the people, right? So it's much easier for a person to buy an ounce of silver than it is for a person to buy an ounce of gold. Now, I think about it like, for example, Warren Buffett's got two stocks of Berkshire Hathaway, right? He's got a B stock and an A stock. The B stock costs $200. The A stock costs $300,000, right? For one stock, one share of one stock, right? So which is more accessible? So here's my point, right? I'm probably dragging this on more than it should, but when silver starts moving, because silver is such a smaller market dollar-wise, and it's more accessible by the people, you get more people moving into it, that pushes the price much faster, much higher, much more volatile than gold's price goes up. I also think about it this way, and this is the exact example I used. Do you remember when the retro gaming consoles became popular a couple years ago? And it started with like the Nintendo NES Classic. I don't know if you remember, but it was 2016. I remember it distinctly because I had this friend of mine who was saying, "Oh man, I'm gonna go wait and get this Nintendo for my kid. I can't wait." And I really think he was trying to get it for himself, right? But so he went out to this, I think it was Toys R Us still at the time.
Yeah.
And he waited in line for hours and hours and hours. And when they finally released these Nintendos to the public, there was none for him, right? They only had like a few of them in the store. Uh-huh. Long story short, this Nintendo released in 2016 at a price of $60. And within days, it was selling on eBay for $500, $750, $1,000. Why? It was selling like that because there's only a finite supply of these little retro gaming Nintendo machines, and you got all these people coming in wanting to get a piece of it. So the price just turbocharged, right? Yeah. In comparison, right, I look at like a high-end gaming computer, right? Like a computer like that I built for my son over Christmas that we built together. This computer costs $2,000, right? So you can think of the computer like gold. You don't have a flood of people rushing to buy enthusiast-level high-end gaming computers. Yeah. As much as you do a flood of people rushing in to buy, a hip, trendy, fashionable retro gaming machine in the Nintendo Classic, right? So that's the thing to understand, right? That people don't, I don't know if people know this is coming or not, but this is coming, right? Yeah. Gold's on the move. Silver's going to get on the move, and because of silver's property of being a smaller market dollar-wise and being able to have more people access that market, oh man, it's going to be like a turbocharger, and the price is really going to get moving here, Mike.
Interesting. And so one thing, the big difference between video game consoles and metals is that video game consoles are more so geared towards a younger population, and metals will be for escape out of this crumbling system by everybody globally. So we're going to have younger and more so older people running to get a hold of a finite metal whatsoever. So I'm looking at the prices. And so we usually talk a lot about gold and silver. We never talk about platinum, palladium. And I'm looking at some prices right now on the Silver Doctor's page here of prices. And it looks like, platinum, I think, as a high of $833, and then palladium is $1,350, the same price as gold. Now, in your opinion, would you say all four of those metals would be in the same category as far as being suppressed, of course, in price, but yet also going to take off like a rocket once everybody realizes what's going on and rush to the doors as far as trying to get hold of metals?
I do think that they're all going to take off. And part of the reason is, right, there's four precious metals: gold, silver, platinum, and palladium. Mm-hmm. And, if we talk about how the mainstream media, the central bankers, the politicians, if we talk about how they hate gold, they really hate silver. Yeah. But, here's one thing that I like to think about that people don't really think about in these terms. Bless you. Is that gold, platinum, and palladium, if you average them out, right? I haven't done the math in a while, but it averages at like $1,000 an ounce, right? For 1 ounce of physical precious metal in your hand. If you average all four precious metals, where you take into consideration platinum, palladium, gold, and silver, the average price is still $750, right? For 1 ounce of a precious metal. But silver's sitting at $15, right? There's something severely wrong with the price of silver, and it's severely wrong to the underside because of the suppression and because of the manipulation. And it ties in with, how I was just explaining in the video game scenario. When you have a finite supply of silver, but silver is the money of the people, when you get young people, when you get older people, when you get this flight to safety on, oh man, they're really going to move into silver. But yes, all four of the metals, I do see all four of the metals entering in that bull market again. And palladium's been the one that's been leading the way the whole time. Yeah. Right? I mean, palladium is like 50% over the last year. I can't remember the exact terms, but we were at like $800 like a year ago or something like that. Yeah. I don't follow palladium quite as much on a day-to-day, tick by tick. Yeah, me either. Just the general trend, right? But
and so interesting. Let's see. Let me check in with the chat and find out what's going on over there. Any questions or any thoughts? So we got Peter from the UK. Peter, what are your thoughts on President Trump's tour there? Share with us in the chat. I heard of some protests, and if you want, Paul, we can move to that topic as well.
Yeah, it's not a topic. It's just something I really wanted to rant on, just for 1 second, if I could be, so honored to have a minute to rant here.
Yeah, feel free. Go ahead. Enlighten us with some things. Yeah.
Because I get a lot of heat for this because I say that, President Trump and Jerome Powell and all these guys are like rock stars, right? Mm-hmm. And it really is what they're like. And I think about it this way, right? Sometime after Freddie Mercury, right, the lead singer for Queen, died, they had this, Freddie Mercury tribute concert at Wembley Stadium in the UK. And it was like to raise money for like HIV and AIDS awareness and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I actually was had the luck, right, of being in Great Britain at that time, and I didn't have tickets to the concert, but my friend and I, we were actually outside of Wembley Stadium, just kind of enjoying the concert because we didn't have tickets, so we were just hanging out. But my point is that, there were probably more people around Wembley Stadium just hanging out, having a good time, because some of the bands, I don't remember all the bands, right? But I was really into Metallica at the time, and Metallica was one of the bands that played at this tribute concert for Freddie Mercury. Yeah. And I mean, you're talking about like the biggest bands of this would have been like 91, like 90, 91, 92. It's just about the biggest bands of the early 90s were playing at this tribute concert, right? They weren't there because they wanted to, per se, have a huge stake in HIV and AIDS research, right? They were there because they wanted to see the rock stars. Yeah. You know what I mean? Fast forward that, right? In Mexico City, same thing. This is the year 2000. There's this awesome band out of Argentina that I like called Fabulous Cadillacs, right? Los Fabulosos Cadillacs. Yeah. And they were playing in Mexico City. Once again, as my luck would have it, didn't have tickets, right? But we went to this concert outside this it would be what would be considered like a civic center, right? Yeah. In Mexico City. I think it was called the Velodromo. But anyway, so we were outside, and there were thousands and thousands and thousands of more people outside, again, who didn't have tickets, enjoying the music, enjoying the concerts, wanting to go listen to the music and enjoy the rock stars, right? Yeah. So, all over Twitter's blowing up. Check this out. Look at all this support that President Trump has. In the UK, they just love him. It's all about President Trump and making America great again and this and that. Yeah. It's not. They're there to see a rock star because it's free and it's the fun thing to do, right? Yeah. I mean, this is what's going on. If it was truly and honestly about they're really rallying behind the president, well, in my opinion, they're getting duped, right? Yeah. So, I just thought that was interesting because I keep seeing these parallels to this rock star status, and people are like, see, people do support the president. That's not what it's like. They're going there because it's a free activity. They're there to see a rock star. Yeah. Why not? Who knows what's going to go on? Yeah. I mean, anytime I get a chance to go see a free concert from some powerhouse rock star, I'm all up on it. Yeah. So that was just my little rant there. I appreciate you giving me the time to rant there, Mike.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, you mentioned two cases. You were on the outside of the concert. I bet you had a just as good of a time as if you were inside.
Yes. I mean, the Mexico City one especially, because there were riot police there. And riot police in Mexico are much more ruthless than riot police here. I mean, it's changed since then. But there, I mean, they just straight up beat you and tear gas you and water cannon you.
Yeah. It's a different walk of life as far as security is concerned outside this country. So it'll appear like we're more, I guess, civilized and reserved than outside, to where they get extremely rowdy. Did you ever have a chance to go to any soccer events when you were out of the country?
Oh yeah, I used to love soccer events. I used to love it, and they would, and it's cheap too. I'm talking real cheap, just $2 to see a professional soccer match. Yeah. Of course, we're talking about 1999, 2000, 2001. So I don't know what the price of a ticket is now, but they would have things like wear the team's colors, right? So Necaxa, right? So you'd wear red. So I had this red Coca-Cola shirt. You get into the game for free. Yeah. And the Aztec Stadium down in Mexico, it's so popular, and NFL football is so popular that I don't know if they still do it, but once a year they used to have the Steelers play the Cowboys at that stadium in Mexico City. Right. So, sports are real big down there and events are real big down there. Yeah. And the crowds, they do get rowdy. So, especially over there in Europe too with all the soccer hooligans, right?
Definitely. I've had a privilege of going to one or two games in my era, and when somebody score a goal, it's it's a lot of energy in those buildings. All right, so let's keep moving. We got let's go on the chat. Chivas, Trump is an actor. Why think the people that he is a saint? I would agree that he's in power for a certain. He's in position at the right time to do what he was put there to do, and so whatever that might be, Paul, if you want to elaborate on that, feel free to do so. But yet, he's the right man for the job coming down the home stretch of all this global entanglement that we're all caught up in. So.
Sorry, I totally missed that point completely because I saw a question that caught my eye about the platinum and palladium.
No problem.
But we're talking about President Trump is in the right place at the right time?
Yeah, so someone here, I think I can't I can't pronounce that, but it says Trump is an actor. Why think the people that he is a saint? And I was just saying that he's strategically placed at his right time frame whether it be divinely or intentionally, for whatever is going to take place or what's unfolding right now, in my opinion. So
yeah, and I completely agree with that person's statement. That I think he is being an actor in this. I think he's the fall guy for the deep state. And we know he's an actor. He is an actor, right? I mean, he's been on WWE wrestling, shaving Ed McMahon's hair, whoever that was. He's got his reality he's got a celebrity cooking show or something. But there was this one comment about the auto industry and platinum and palladium, right?
Okay.
And about how can platinum and palladium catch a bid when auto industry is going down, and that's true, right?
Yeah.
When we talk about precious metals, right? Historically, gold and silver are monetized, right? Yeah. They're money. Yeah. There's still our money in the United States Constitution. That's still a thing, believe it or not.
Yeah.
But but they're still precious metals, but they're on the industrial side. That said, the palladium shortage is real, right? Mm-hmm. This has been, thoroughly documented. David Jensen is the go-to authority on that, and it's especially been documented based on the physical supplies and movements out of London, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, there's the suppression going on of all the precious metals. There's the manipulation of all markets going on right now. But the bottom line is, palladium is going to catch a bid, even if it's not so much for the safe haven bid, it's for the, if you need palladium, and you're going to pay the price for it because the market forces are taking over.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree 100%. And so at the end of the day, if gold and silver, which are used as monetary metals, are become very problematic to get your hands on physically, then they're going to go to the whatever's next, and then right next to those, where silver and gold coins usually are positioned in stores or online, you got platinum and palladium also there that might still be there a little bit longer than gold and silver, and then people are going to grab those. So there will be a demand, no doubt.
Yes, and on top of that, one more point about that, because it was only, I don't remember if it was 17 or 18, which exact year, but the U.S. Mint recently just started with a Palladium Eagle, right? So this Palladium Eagle, I think it was 17 if I'm not mistaken, but I get confused with the years. But anyway, so, that's also not to say that in the future there could be the investment demand for that safe haven movement into palladium as it becomes more of a mainstream alternative investment. Yeah. So, the future is looking good for all the precious metals. Yeah. And, just to put out a little teaser, I got an interview with Bix Weir coming up in the morning that I'm going to launch. Yeah. But, we were just talking about the fact that, all of these markets are manipulated. All of these markets are managed. And silver is even more manipulated and managed than all the other ones. Yeah. But he and I were both thinking that, for different reasons even, silver would get to that 1-to-1 parity with gold, which I'm a firm believer in. And, palladium's at that 1-to-1 parity with gold right now. Just a couple months ago, palladium was at 1550 or 1575.
Yeah, interesting. So let me see. Take a look at the chat real quick, and I'm gonna pulled up the next topic that I want to touch on, and it has to do with the Powell pending stimulus package that will be unleashed sometime before the end of this year. I think they're definitely, he's for those that haven't been paying attention or haven't had a chance to watch, just yesterday, for the very first time, there was a conference called Fed Listens, where the FOMC got together. They called it Fed Listens. Very first time they've done this. Why? Why now? Who knows? But I believe it was strategically done for them to forewarn the markets as to what they're going to do strategically to help bolster this economic expansion. As he's mentioned, they'll do anything they can to keep the expansion rolling. And so basically the only way they can do that is to monetize and drop rates and to begin printing and stimulating things. And so looking like whether it be half a point or 3/4 of a point might come off the current Fed fund rate. And right now we're at 2.25. That means we'll probably be 1.5 in the best case scenario. That's planned. And that's not factoring in any type of hiccups outside of us that forces us to respond, whether it be a banking situation, who knows. And so the job numbers just came out, so ain't no telling how that might play. And so whatever. They're planning to go 3/4 of a point, but yet that doesn't factor in what they're going to need to do to actually respond when the recession fully hits. So what are your thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because, one of the things that they talk about is the fact that they're concerned that part of the reasoning behind this preemptive stimulus, right, is because, they're concerned that inflation expectations are going to get near their 2% target, which is the biggest crock of crap, right? It's like, in 1984, they said Oceania's at war with Eurasia. Oceania has always been at war with Eurasia. Well, guess what? Inflation is always going to be near, but not at their 2% target, right? So this is really just doublespeak going on. But, they're claiming that weak inflation is one thing that's giving them the cover that they need. They're also claiming that, the tensions around the globe with the trade war could give them the cover that they need. And it's not just, the Fed and the conference calls, not just Jerome Powell. So on Monday, James Bullard said this, right? He said this on Monday, right? That weak inflation and tensions around the globe because of the trade wars might cause the Fed to consider a rate cut sooner than later. I'm paraphrasing, that's not the exact words, but that's what he said on CNBC on Monday. But yeah, this is, as Jim Willey would call it, this is Zimbabwe-style hyperinflation. And it really is. And that's what it's going to come down to. Yeah. You gave a great interview yesterday with, had a great discussion. You had a great discussion yesterday with John Rubino. I'd recommend that people go back and listen to that conversation. I'd also like to challenge listeners to check out how we've been stepping up here at Silver Doctors with our interviews lately. But, you had a great conversation with him, but the one thing that John said that I would disagree with was, he's not sure whether it's going to play out in an inflationary spiral or a deflationary crash, right? And, I think it's baked in the cake that it's going to be hyperinflation, right? It's always hyperinflation when we're talking about a fiat currency. So, when he's talking about, this preemptive, we need to consider making these unconventional policy tools more conventional in order to keep the expansion going. Well, first of all, you don't keep the expansion going. That's not natural, right? Just like the human body can't go forever. You have to sleep, you have to rest, you have to get sick, you have to purge, you have to do everything, right? So, just to even have the gall to make such a statement like that, just how it's not like causing people to, bring the pitchforks and torches out. I mean, come on, you're on this binge and you're going to drink yourself to death. And that's exactly what we're going to do with our monetary policy. But we know it's going to end in hyperinflation. When they say these types of things, I mean, I don't know how much more of a signal people need to get before they start moving into gold and silver. Part of the issue is because, there's such the mainstream pushback, right, to cast gold in a bad light. Fed will never ever talk about it, So, it's not shocking at all because we know this is how it's going to end up because we know this is how it always ends up. What's shocking about it is the market participants are like, well, the Fed's going to, decide that they need to act on this forever. Well, I mean, if you would be following the work in the alternative media, you would already know this, right?
Yeah. What really concerns me the most is that not only are we going to continue to do more of what did not work initially, they know that the stimulus and quantitative easing and all those monetary tools they introduced to us didn't really help Main Street. It's going to further the wealth gap between those that are aware of the opportunities that this stimulus will create for those that are in the know, and it's going to hurt those that are basically being more practical and financially responsible by doing things that they thought were sound, such as, saving in your accounts and other things that has to do with the paper they're about to be creating at a alarming rate. And so it basically encourages those to go into debt for the sake of profiting from that, and then it will steal more from those that save in the very currency that they are about to unleash more of. And so it's about to be a much more visible wealth separation between those that know and those that don't know. And I think at that point, people will begin to feel the pain more so. But all this has to take place in order to keep this thing going, because if they ease up, if they cut back or close the water spigot or the easing spigot, everything dries up, it crashes, which would they basically lead to that restructuring of our monetary system, which they're looking to avoid. And so,
which is what we need, but that's exactly what we need.
Correct, 100%. And to go ahead, you want to go ahead?
Oh no, I was about to piggyback on your hurting the savers, because that's an excellent point. That's one of the, my own personal testimonies or whatever you want to call it. That's one of the reasons why I learned about gold and silver, because I remember I've got this little pack of matches from this bank from the 80s, and it's really funny because it's talking about use our totally brand new drive-up service. It's like that's how much of a thing, there's like, who would have thought you could drive up to a window in the bank in the 80s and get service?
Yeah.
But the weird is on the inside flap of this matchbook from the 80s. This is when people still smoked and when they even gave out matches when you bought a pack of cigarettes, right?
Yeah.
But it said, open up a savings account and get 5% interest. It was like, oh my God, that is like real money right there now. And if you think about it, right? Like people used to talk like, I want to be a millionaire when I grow up. I want to be rich. Mm-hmm. Well, why? Because if you had $1 million in the bank, right? Yeah. And if you were making 5% interest, something that you could easily do, anybody could do, right? Under normal situations, right? If you had $1 million in the bank and you were earning 5% interest, you could get paid $50,000 a year off of that $1 million, and you'd be able to live high off the hog, right? Yeah. So, fast forward to today, and what do we have today? This is one of the reasons why I learned about gold and silver, right? Because I come from the prepper community, and after you have, like I said, enough, water's heavy, food is heavy. Once you get so much, and it expires and it's perishable.
Yeah.
So my wife and I started looking at each other, and we're like, but, we've got this money in the bank. We've got all this money in the bank, which is really a really tiny amount of money, right? Yeah. So I think it's a lot of money. But anyway, so, we got all this money in the bank, and we're literally getting 1 penny of interest paid to us every single month. I mean, what a joke. Yeah. If they could give us 1/10 of a penny, I'm telling you, Mike, they would give us 1/10 of a penny, right? But that's one of the reasons why we went into gold and silver, because that's exactly what the Federal Reserve is doing with their policies. Mm-hmm. They are punishing people for saving. They're punishing people for doing the right thing. Well, if they're punishing people for saving and they're punishing people for doing the right thing, that means they're rewarding somebody. Who are they rewarding? They're rewarding Wall Street. They're rewarding the politicians. They're rewarding the bankers. This whole corrupt circle jerk that's going on, Mike.
Yeah, they're rewarding those that know that the system is designed for those that are willing to take risk. So those on Main or Wall Street rather that enjoy debt, those that use debt for their benefit, such as those that love to speculate and just borrow for the sake of trying to flip and turn over that money at a very low margin or to arbitrage or whatnot. So people who take risks will be rewarded, and people who are responsible will be punished, is what it boils down to. And as you mentioned, the amount of interest that's earned or lack thereof, not too many people really talk about that. Right after the Great Recession, the monetary policy that became a financial opportunity for people as they want to position it is cash back. So they don't give you interest, but they'll encourage you to spend, and they say earn 2% cash back when you use such and such and such a card. And I'm thinking, like, people don't realize that they're telling you to spend in order to get money back. So that's totally contradictory towards what was normal as far as you lend by saving. You're lending your money to the bank anyway. They're paying you interest on using it. Now they're saying you spend this and we'll give you a little bit of it back.
Yes, and it's so sick and twisted. It really is, because take it one step further, right? We used to say cash is king, right? And there used to be a reason for that, because you could walk in somewhere, and you could be buying, some high ticket, washing machine or whatever, and you could be like, well, give me 5% discount if I pay in cash. Sure, let's do this. But now it's like they look at you like you're a criminal if you pay for it in cash. And the only way you can get a discount is if you put it on that credit card, right? So, and then the sick part about it, like you're talking about, we're going to pay you 5% back. Well, you're paying 20% interest on it, so they're still making 15. It's like, when does this end?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, if people only realize what was going on. So, let me see. We got in the chat. So once again, it says, where is the missing $2.3 trillion CMOS? So yeah, that's a whole nother subject matter that has gotten a lot of attention from the Greg Hunters and the Catherine Austin Fitts and all those people talk about that missing trillion. And I'm thinking like this: if that missing 21 trillion, whatever it is that they calculated, actually appears in the economy, shows up somewhere, that's game over, because that all those trillions will, if they're entered into the economy chasing goods and services, they don't need to stimulate, because they're going to have instantaneous stimulation right there. So I hope that 21 trillion stay missing, because, well, I'm not sure if I hope, but anyway it go, that we don't know the full amount of digits that they brought into existence. So it doesn't really matter at this point, because no matter what, all those debts will not be repaid and all that money will not be accounted for. But one thing I do want to mention is that every note or every digital note that is brought into existence will be held accountable when it comes to having to chase after a good or a service.
Would
you agree with that?
And the ultimate thing that it will account for is gold and silver, because that's the only thing that can put the dollar in check.
Yeah.
That's it, gold and silver.
100%.
You also bring up a good point. I think it's way more than 21 or 23 trillion.
Why wouldn't it be?
I'm not a PhD at Michigan State. I'm not, or Michigan, wherever the Seymour or whatever his name is from. I definitely don't have Catherine Austin Fitz insight in the federal government like she does. But I do know this, I have not seen a fresh $20 bill out of an ATM in years, right?
Yeah.
And I do know this. I've seen fresh pallets of cash stacked up, head towards Iran, right? We see those fresh, metal cases of cash marked off in Red Cross humanitarian aid, right? So we know there's all this excess cash out there. And I think it's almost like there's these little micro economies going on where there's just been an influx of dollars. And it's just that the world hasn't caught on yet, right? But I think these dollars are, in fact, out there and they are swirling around.
Yeah.
And yes, once people take note of just the extent of how much money has been printed, that's why I've been calling it over the past couple weeks a game of hot potato. And I think that we're playing it.
Yeah. Now,
smart people are already playing it, right? And they're about to just take their winnings off the table and leave.
Yeah. As you were talking, I pulled up the U.S. debt clock. And so I'm not even sure of the origin of this or how they come up with these numbers, but it seems to give a good idea as to the financial balance sheet of our country and some of the expenditures and just some of the details. And people love to reference the actual per ounce price, fiat currency per ounce price of gold and silver. And so I'm looking here, and it says, as of right now, the dollar to silver ratio is 592 per ounce. And so when I mentioned just a moment ago that every note will be held accountable, this is how it will be held accountable. And so how that number comes about is basically to take the total supply of known notes in existence. It says the year-over-year increase in the U.S. M2 supply divided by the yearly world production of silver in ounces is what gives us that price. And that's according to what we know. So I would imagine that 592 is probably on the low end. And so if there was no manipulation and if there was free markets that were able to float and true price discovery was available, it would cost at a low end roughly $600 to go get you an ounce of silver that you could actually set aside as a form of savings. And of course, if there's no interest that will be earned on that, but it's protection and it's insurance more so against the currency that you would use on a day-to-day basis type of thing. So
yes, and to take it one step further, because I actually don't like that number.
Yeah.
And let me tell you why I don't like that number.
Go ahead.
I think it's a good number, right? And it's useful how you're talking about it. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing about that number. And people miss this, right? But you said it right. It's the amount of dollars against global silver production. Mm-hmm. Here's why I have a problem with that. You're talking about the dollar debt, right? The amount of dollar debt.
Yeah.
But it's global silver production, right? Mm-hmm. So if you take the amount of U.S. debt, right? Because it's U.S. dollars debt. It's the U.S. national debt. If you take the amount of U.S. debt with U.S. silver production, oh, man, that number is much higher than $580 or whatever the number was that you just said.
Yeah.
So, what you would have to do is you would have to take, if you're talking apples to apples, you would have to take global debt, right? What's the national debt combined of all the countries around the world? Divide that by the global supply of silver. And these numbers are way larger than the numbers that we even see on debtclock.org.
Yeah.
So yes, it's when gold and silver are the ultimate check for the dollar, they really are, and that's what you're talking about. Well, what is it showing the gold price is on that page?
1 second, I'll pull it back up. I actually stepped away. I'm actually looking up the global debt. And so gold, it says, what is it? Go. The dollar to gold ratio is $4,826. So 4,826 per ounce, according to this particular calculation. And as you mentioned, this is very moderate. This is very conservative. This is just based upon two measurements: the World Gold Council and the M2 supply. So those are just two measurable things. But yet, once again, as you mentioned, this is a global system that's all chasing something of this importance. And so you got the euro, all the euros in circulation. We got all the Russian rubles, the Chinese yuan, all those fiat currencies are all chasing these small strategic monetary metals. And so to factor that in to the global debt, and I'm not even sure if that's how it's actually factored in, but where is it at? I was going to pull something up here, but it's the total global debt was $244 trillion. And that's and that's denominated in dollars. So I'm assuming that takes into account all the money that's been borrowed and positioned around the country in different reserves and all that stuff like that. So if you take that 244 trillion, factor that into that same amount of World Gold Council gold, that will give us a number that I'm not
multiples.
I'm not good with math, so I wouldn't begin to even try.
No, you're talking about multiples, right? Because if we're 21 trillion and let's call it 210 trillion, then we're adding another zero. So instead of $500 silver, we're talking about $5,000 silver
on the very
right?
short end.
Yeah. So this is what I'm talking about. So like even when we see these like numbers, like no, silver's never going to 500. You guys are just silver pumpers and you're dreaming, right? Yeah. No, because it will happen because that's what happens every single time. The dollar is not immune from the curse of going full fiat, and that's what we've done. Yeah. And we've been full fiat since 1971, arguably since 1973-74, when it wound down, when countries could actually convert those dollars for gold, and then the price was revalued $42 an ounce.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. So let's check in with the chat. And as always, once again, we're going back and forth. So it looks like, according to what I'm seeing here, there's close to almost 200 people that's tuned in right now, and I think that's probably somewhat of an all-time high for us. I'm not sure. But as always, I appreciate you guys taking time to hang out with us. If you've enjoyed the back and forth thus far, don't be afraid to donate a thumbs up right beneath this video somewhere, just to show your support for the channel, and it helps others find out what we're doing over here during the afternoons on Wednesday. But are there any questions out there? Paul, scroll through and see if you see anything that comes across your eye that you might want to answer. And I'll do the same. Let's see if we got anything going on here. I'm from the UK in the housing estate. Seamus, how's the real estate market out in the UK? I heard there's a lot of housing that's overinflated, like of course here, but yet they're coming down on house prices. Do you follow so Paul? I'm assuming you're following the house housing market with your recent situation there. What's your thought on the price adjustments in the housing? I'm noticing more people are coming down now because they can't. The houses aren't moving as fast as they would like for them to with these inflated prices.
Yeah, I look at the housing market like this. This is just in general, right? So fundamentally speaking, right? The housing market dies just like the body dies, right? So, if you're freezing to death, right, you're going to lose your arms and your legs first, right? Yeah. So what are the arms and the legs of the housing market? The arms are the really high-end houses, right? Like your $1 million McMansions, your $200 million McMansions, your super McMansions. What are the legs? That's the low end, right? That's your $1 houses, right? That your neck of the woods was so famous for, right? Those all over in urban areas that are in, some sort of urban blight, you can find, $15,000, $10,000, $20,000 houses. So those are the other extremities, right? So you got your high end and your low end, right? And the body dies from the extremities to the core. What's the core? Well, in the United States, that core is like $395,000 for the average price of the house, right? I don't know if that's the exact number. It's close to that, right? Yeah. But those are going to be the last houses to go. So when we're seeing this housing bubble pop, what we're seeing is that these problems are starting now on the really high end, right? And that makes sense, because if you're freezing, first things that are going to get affected are your fingers, right? So those fingers are those, multi-million-dollar estates. When it comes to Australia, I would divert to, there's a great economist. We actually post his work. We're in communication with him a lot. His name is John Adams. And he exposes all of this stuff. And I'm probably going off of bad memory, but his YouTube channel is called like In the Interests of People or something like that. But they expose it. And, Australia, it just goes to show you that all of these central banks, none of these currencies are any good. They're all fiat currencies. No. None of these central banks are any good. They're all working together and colluding together. So Australia, it's called the Reserve Bank of Australia, right? So Australia's central bank, they're doing the same exact things. They're talking about how they're going to stimulate it so they can, help save the housing market. They're talking about how they can figure out a way to get people into houses who can't afford them because the housing market's gone parabolic. They're talking about interest rate cuts, all of the same stuff that we're talking about, they're talking about, right? It's kind of how we were talking a few weeks ago, like, what's my plan? My plan's to hunker down because there's nowhere to go. There is nowhere to go. right? Because there's no place on earth that's honest. Yeah. The only place on earth that's honest, and when I say honest, I'm talking about honest money, because that's where it begins, right? Mm-hmm. Money is a tool, right? Yeah. So it's the ultimate tool, right? So since no place on earth is honest except for the most extreme local of places, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'm having a private interaction, a private transaction with somebody with gold or silver, that's honesty there. That's at a local level. But just geographically and internationally, yeah. I mean, all these central banks are in lockstep with each other.
Yeah, very true.
You know, so
very true.
And and about the housing market, it's kind of turned, right? Well, the rhetoric is kind of turned on interest rates, right? But, there's so many things that would say that housing prices have to come down, right? Mm-hmm. One is because, they've gone straight up for 10 years, right? So are they likely to keep going up for another 10 years, or is there going to be some pullback here, right? Because nothing goes straight up forever. Right. That's number one. Number two, the Fed is raising interest rates, theoretically at least, right? They're talking about rate cuts right now, but ultimately we're talking about the Fed has to come up on rates. Yeah. Well, what does that mean? That means that if you go to buy a house, right, that means that, if you were going to pay 4% interest, but now you're going to pay 6 or 7% interest. Guess what? If you could afford that $250,000 house before, well, now you can only afford a $180,000 house. Yeah. So what does that mean? That means you either buy less house or the price of that house comes down, right? Yeah. Then there's a third thing. And the third thing, and this is, specific to the United States, but theoretically, right, when President Trump signed the Tax Cuts and Job Act, or Tax Jobs and Cuts Act, or you remember the tax cut, right, from the very first year, and it was like December 2017 when it passed. Yeah. When that tax legislation was passed, they combined the state and local tax deduction, right? Mm-hmm. So they call that the SALT tax, right? That's where you could combine, if you itemize your deductions, you could combine your state income taxes as well as your local property taxes. No, those were separated, right? So now they're combined and they're capped. My point is that before, where you could deduct more of the taxes, you could deduct more of what you paid for your house on your taxes. Yeah. Now you can't do that. Yeah. If you can't deduct all of that like you could on your house, well, what does that mean? That means that you can't say, oh, buy a house because it's good on your taxes. It's good for your taxes, because that's not the case anymore, right? People are just now finding this out. They don't fully understand this quite yet. And it's only just now kicking in, right? Because that law kicked in. That law was signed in 2017. Mm-hmm. It didn't start until 2018, and you don't have the first filings on it until just recently this year in 2019. So, these ramifications are still not even being felt yet, but they will be, right? So this is why I think the housing market is going to be coming down. Yeah. Because there's just so many factors that say theoretically it has to come down, because that's just numbers. It's just simple math and economics at that point.
Yeah, I agree. So we have a question that I wanted to touch on, and I'm about to sneeze again. Ooh. So the question is from Richard, and I think it's a very good question. It says, who do we sell our silver to in a collapse? Your thoughts on that?
Depends, pre-collapse, post-collapse, during collapse. During collapse, I don't think you should sell it to anybody, mm-hmm. right? So it's good times, bad times, and then wait until the rebuild. Yeah. When it comes to the rebuild, who do you sell it to? Well, it really depends, Will we go back, which I think we will, to a gold and silver standard, mm-hmm. right? If we go back to a gold and silver standard, then technically it's not so much as selling it as it is using it, right? Yeah. And then there's also that barter aspect. But, when it comes down to it, who do you sell it back to? I mean, the question is, well, how much are you going to sell, mm-hmm. right? Because, if you're just talking about one or two coins, then you're just talking about selling it locally, to a coin shop, selling it on eBay or something like that. Yeah. If you're talking about 100 ounces, if you're talking about 500 ounces, if you're talking about 5,000 ounces or something like that, mm-hmm. then you need to look for someone who actually has that kind of capital who can buy it, right? Yeah. Because not anybody can just say, oh, I'll buy 5,000 ounces of silver, right? Mm-hmm. That's a lot of money, So that's when you would essentially go to a dealer at that point. That's what a dealer does. A dealer provides a service, right? Yeah. They buy and they sell and they make their money, very tight profit margin on that spread. Yeah. So, this isn't a secret. This is just how it works. Yeah. So, when do you sell? In my opinion, you hold off as long as you can. You sell after the collapse, after that reset has begun, because that's when the dust will have settled and you have reaped those rewards. Yeah. And then who do you sell it to? Well, it depends on how much you're selling. I don't know what the cutoff would be, because it would be a lot of work to sell coins individually.
Yeah.
So, you need somebody who's got, does somebody have $100,000 that they can give you for that silver that you have? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now, here's the thing. A couple things about what you're referring to. It's kind of hard to answer that question because we've never entered into a point like we're probably going to experience where there's going to be a completely new monetary system in general. Therefore, I don't anticipate the Federal Reserve note being the primary or leading currency in this country. So there'll be probably the reissuance of a new currency of some kind or a new unit of account, which will then probably, as Jim Willie has mentioned several times, which will need to be adjusted as far as being devalued a couple times to make it more of a balanced currency in reference to the new basket of international currency, whatever that might be. So there might be a nice lengthy period after this restructuring of our monetary system that the currency that we have to utilize, it might be digital. I doubt it be in paper form officially. So it's going to be one of the things where you might want to take even more time to let things play themselves out because, in my opinion, that could be several years because we're working on 100 years of manipulation of having abused the world with the Federal Reserve note. Therefore, it's not going to be a quick, in 1 month, we up and running again. Everything's fine. Now you can get back to normal trade, normal savings. So I think,
yes.
And I like one person mentioned about probably not necessarily even needing to sell their currencies because if you sell it, you're just subject to capital gains. And I'd anticipate the taxes at that point for those that are preppers will be extremely high. And so the concept of borrowing against your weight might be more ideal so that you're not having to actually sell it. You're just using it as collateral for whatever transaction you might want to do, but you don't lose possession of it. So that's a different strategy as well, I think might be utilized.
Yes, and all excellent points that you made. Well said. And in addition, and then here's the big picture with all that, right? Because we're ultimately talking about the U.S. dollar. Mm-hmm. And what we're talking about is it also depends on where you are in the world, right?
Yeah.
If you're using dollars, I mean, America has gone through, basically you could call it since the 1950s, and everybody talks about, the birth of the middle class and the American dream and America and all this and all that, mm-hmm. The golden age of America, whatever. But if you want to say that for the past 7 decades, it's been nothing but America rising to the top. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? For the next 7 decades, guess which way it's going to be going? It's going to be nothing but America, and by consequence, the U.S. dollar going nowhere but down.
Yeah.
So, these are all excellent questions. And, this is not like we're the premier experts on every and all things, how to buy and sell gold and silver, right? We're learning this just like everybody else. Yeah. And it's like you said, it's going to be an experience that we haven't experienced before, and on top of that, there isn't anybody alive anymore who understands what it was like to use gold and silver as real money, right? So there are so many unknowns right now that, as a community, right, as gold and silver community, we need to all help each other out to get through this together, right? Because that's what it's ultimately going to be.
Right.
But, the good news to that, people are like, oh, you're such a doom and gloomer. That's all you do is, all you do is produce fear porn and, you're just some negative Nancy and all this. Well, I mean, not really, because on the other end, if you're one of the people that were smart enough, right, and that's pretty much, in my opinion, the only people who were smart, but if you're one of the people who were smart enough to own gold and silver, right, then you are also, whether you know it or not, part of this rebuilding, right? So you're going to be part of the group of people that, yes, we've gotten the shaft for many, many, many decades, but guess what? We're going to be the ones that are rising up and taking control and dictating the next future course for the United States, for that matter, too, depending on everybody's own individual countries.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. And so, Paul, it looks like we've been on close to 50 minutes. And
I don't even look at the clock.
And that's the thing. Like,
sorry.
I'm thinking like, and if I didn't mention that, we would go through the hour point, which I have no problem with because we got 223 people watching, and so I'm reading some of the comments. And a lot of people are enjoying the back and forth, and they've commented on how the show has been stepped up a little bit. So I appreciate everybody supporting us by hanging out with us this afternoon. But there has to come to an end. Everything good must come to an end, Paul.
Everything good.
So we're going to get ready to wind things down here. But for everyone, if you have not yet, don't be afraid to hit the like button beneath this video to show your support for the channel. And if you are a new subscriber, welcome to the community. And if you want, feel free to share this video on your social media feeds so more people can find out the good back and forth here, because we cover a variety of subject matters, but it's all in relation to what's occurring now and what's transitioning, what we're transitioning into rather, and it impacts everybody. So it's not a topic you won't be able to avoid. So it's better to be ahead of it than, what they say, 1 second too late, or however that saying goes. So, Paul, any last thoughts you want to leave us with before we sign off officially?
No last thoughts today other than tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, we're launching our Big Swear interview, and you did a great interview with John Rubini yesterday. We're stepping up our game on our YouTube channel. We're stepping up our game on our Silver Doctor side, so we want everybody to get even more involved and be more active than they are now.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So that means basically watching the videos that are all educational, and if you find it informative, share them. The more you share, the more people are able to get informed and be able to take action. That's what it's all about. So once again,
protecting themselves.
Protecting yourself. So it's been great hanging out this afternoon. I want to wish everyone a prosperous week, remainder of the week, and blessed weekend. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Tell a friend, invite a friend along with you. And let's continue to encourage and educate and get the word out there about the change that's underway. So everybody, see you guys later. Peace.